Nobody teaches men how to end things. We are taught how to start, how to build, how to fight through everything. But no one ever teaches us how to stop, how to let go, how to close a chapter with dignity. I used to think quitting meant failure. That belief came from every locker room I stood in, every quote my father repeated, every movie that glorified persistence. Winners never quit. Quitters never win. That was the gospel we grew up on. And for a long time, it worked. That mindset built my career. It gave me structure. It made me reliable. It helped me push through sleepless nights, impossible project, painful relationships. It taught me how to survive. But no one told me what would happen when survival became the only goal. No one warned me that I could win at the wrong things. Because not everything that lasts deserves to. Some things are supposed to end, even good things. You see, when you're a man in your 40s or 50s, you realize something strange. The discipline that made you successful can also become your prison. That unstoppable drive that made people admire you is the same force that keeps you stuck in a life that no longer fits. It's the curse of competence. You become too good at maintaining things that don't serve you anymore. I remember sitting in my car one night. It was late. The parking lot was almost empty. Inside that building behind me was the job I once begged for, the career that used to define me. Now it felt like a cage. I sat there in silence, the engine off, the dashboard lights fading, and I asked myself, why am I still doing this? Everyone around me said I had made it. A stable career, a nice home, a family that looked perfect on paper, but inside, I felt like I was living someone else's version of success. The more I tried to keep it all together, the emptier I became. That's when it hit me. No one ever told us that holding on can be just as dangerous as giving up. Because real strength isn't about endurance. It's about awareness. The awareness to recognize when something has run its course. But we men are programmed to push, to fix, to hold. We are rewarded for pain tolerance, not emotional intelligence. We are praised for showing up, even when our hearts have already left. In America, that belief runs deep. From football fields to office boardrooms, we are told to play hurt, to work through the pain, to grind harder. But there comes a point when the pain isn't growth anymore. It's decay. I saw it happen to a friend of mine, Michael. He was 52, a senior executive in a big company. On paper, he had everything. He wore success like armor, but the truth is, he was exhausted. He stayed in a marriage that had turned into routine. He stayed in a job that paid well but drained his soul. He stayed because leaving felt like betrayal. Not just to others, but to the man he used to be. One evening, we had dinner at a quiet bar in Chicago. He stared at his glass for a long time before saying, "I hate who I become when I walk into that building." He said it softly, like a confession, and I knew exactly what he meant. Because that's the same thought that haunted me. You build your life on discipline, on showing up, on being the man who never quits. But one day, you realize you've been loyal to the wrong things. Loyal to a version of yourself that no longer exists. That realization doesn't come loud. It comes quietly, in small moments, like when you sit in traffic and feel nothing, when you walk into a house that used to feel alive and now it's just walls and echoes. When you wake up on Monday and the first thought that hits you is not gratitude, but dread. That's the moment the truth starts whispering, and it says, "This is not it anymore." But you ignore it, because quitting feels like failure, because people still look at you with respect, because walking away means answering questions you're not ready to face. So you keep going, you show up, you keep playing your role, you wear your smile like a uniform, and every day, you lose a little more of yourself. I call that the quiet death. It doesn't come with crisis or collapse. It comes with routine. It comes when you stop feeling both joy and pain, and settle into numbness. It's when your life still looks impressive to everyone else, but it no longer feels alive to you. That's where most men over 40 get stuck. Not in failure, but in comfort. Not in chaos, but in stability. We stay because leaving would force us to rebuild, and rebuilding means facing ourselves. But here's what I've learned. You can only fake fulfillment for so long before it eats away at you. You can only wear the mask of everything's fine until one day it cracks, and the man underneath is tired, hollow, unrecognizable. The truth is, you don't need to wait for a breakdown to make a change. You just need to get honest. Honest enough to say, this chapter has ended. Honest enough to admit that holding on out of habit is still a form of fear. And fear, no matter how quiet, will always keep you small. Because endings are not the enemy. They are the beginning of clarity, and clarity is what most men are starving for. We tell ourselves that quitting is weakness, that real men stay, that loyalty is what defines character. But sometimes, loyalty is just fear wearing a noble mask. I know this because I lived it. For years, I stayed in things that were already over: jobs, friendships, routines, even versions of myself. I stayed, not because they were right for me, but because leaving felt disrespectful to the man who built them. That's the trap. We confuse persistence with purpose. We think that staying proves strength. But strength without direction is just endurance. And endurance, without meaning, becomes suffering. When you're a man in your 40s or 50s, you start to feel it. It's not burnout exactly. It's a quiet kind of emptiness. You're not miserable, but you're not alive either. You're not failing, but you're not fulfilled. You wake up each morning, go through the motions, and tell yourself this is what being responsible looks like. But deep down, you know something's off. That whisper, you ignore it, never goes away. It just gets quieter until it turns into silence. And that silence is dangerous, because it feels like peace. But it isn't peace. It's resignation. I remember the day I realized that difference. I was 48, driving home from work on a cold Tuesday night. The city lights blurred through the rain. The radio was playing, but I wasn't listening. My mind was somewhere else, somewhere quieter, and a thought crossed my mind that scared me more than any failure ever did. I thought, if this is it, if this is all there is, I'm done pretending this is enough. That thought didn't make me panic. It made me breathe. For the first time in years, I exhaled without forcing it, and in that silence, something inside me shifted. That was the beginning of my awakening. The thing you're afraid to end might already be over. That sentence haunted me for weeks. It echoed in every corner of my life. The job I was clinging to had already ended the day I stopped growing there. The marriage I was trying to fix had already ended when connection turned into obligation. The version of myself I was protecting had already died the day I stopped being honest. We don't notice when things end, because we're too busy keeping them alive. We water dead plants. We repair broken walls. We pretend that effort can bring back something that's already gone. But all it does is keep us stuck, maintaining the ruins. You can't build a new life while you're busy preserving an old one. And yet, most men do exactly that. We keep investing in what no longer grows. We keep showing up out of habit, not passion. We tell ourselves it's duty, but it's fear. Fear of what people will say. Fear of disappointing the version of ourselves that once had a dream. Fear of the unknown. Of the blank page, waiting after we close the chapter. But here's the truth that every wise man eventually learns. You don't rebuild by holding tighter. You rebuild by releasing. Endings aren't signs of failure. They are signs of growth. Quitting is emotional. Ending is intentional. Quitting says, this is too hard. Ending says, this no longer serves who I am becoming. Quitting is driven by frustration. Ending is guided by clarity. And clarity, my friend, is the real freedom. The most successful men I've met in my life didn't just build empires. They learned when to walk away from them. They didn't see endings as losses. They saw them as leadership decisions. Because leadership isn't only about managing others. It's about leading yourself out of the wrong places. A man who never ends anything is a man who never evolves. And evolution requires release. I remember talking to an old friend, a retired Marine named Jack. He told me something I'll never forget. He said, "In the military, they teach you how to start missions, but no one prepares you for the end of them. When the war is over, you still wake up ready to fight, but there's nothing left to fight for. That's when the real battle begins inside you." That stayed with me, because every man has his own kind of war. Some fight for their families, some fight for success, some fight for validation, but every war must end, and when it does, you have to learn how to stop fighting, or you'll keep creating battles just to feel alive. That's what I was doing, starting new struggles just to avoid stillness, because stillness felt like failure, but I was wrong. Stillness isn't failure. It's truth. It's where you finally meet yourself again, stripped of noise, stripped of roles, stripped of expectation. When I finally stopped fighting, I saw something I had missed for years. Peace was never the reward at the end of effort. Peace was what appeared when the effort stopped. That realization changed everything. It reframed how I saw my entire life. I stopped seeing endings as losses. I started seeing them as transitions. I no longer asked, "How can I hold on?" I started asking, "What am I still holding that no longer needs me?" And in that question, I found something powerful: relief. Not joy, not excitement, just relief. The kind of relief that feels like taking off armor you didn't know you were still wearing. For the first time in decades, I could breathe fully, without pretending. I looked at my life and saw what was already over, what was waiting to be released, not with bitterness, but with respect. Every ending, even the painful ones, had taught me something, and the lesson was simple. Real maturity is not about how long you can endure. It's about how clearly you can see when the time to endure is over. That was my reframe. I wasn't quitting. I was ending strategically. I was closing a door not because I was weak, but because I was finally wise enough to know which doors no longer led anywhere. There is a moment in every man's life when he finally understands. It's not that he ran out of strength. It's that he's been using his strength in the wrong direction. That realization doesn't explode. It unfolds slowly, like dawn breaking through a long night. And when it happens, something inside you shifts. The war you've been fighting for years finally ends, not because you won, but because you stopped needing to. That is the real victory. When I say winners do quit, I don't mean they give up easily. I mean they choose their battles wisely. They stop pouring effort into what's already finished. They quit the wrong things, so they can win at the right ones. It takes wisdom to do that, because quitting what's wrong isn't about weakness. It's about integrity. It's about alignment. It's about being honest enough to admit that the life you built yesterday may not fit the man you are today. A few years ago, I met a man named Robert. He had been a corporate lawyer for 25 years. He had everything: money, title, the respect of his peers. But one morning, he woke up and felt nothing. He said, "I realized I had built a life that everyone else admired, but I didn't want to live in it anymore." So he left. No drama, no meltdown. He sold his house, downsized, and started a small consulting firm helping veterans reintegrate into civilian life. He told me, "For the first time in decades, I feel like I'm becoming someone, instead of maintaining someone I no longer am." That line stayed with me, because that's what endings really are. They are moments of becoming, not destruction, but transformation, not collapse, but creation. We are taught that success means building, but what no one tells you is that wisdom means editing. In the first half of life, we build, we chase, we accumulate, we prove. In the second half, we refine. We strip away what's unnecessary. We choose what stays, and we release what doesn't. Men who don't learn that end up buried under the weight of everything they built. They confuse the pile for progress. They call it stability. But it's just stagnation. If you've ever felt stuck, not because you lack options, but because you have too many, This is why. You're carrying things that were meant to be temporary. Roles, identities, responsibilities, all of them valuable once, but not forever. And that's the part no one prepares us for. Letting go of something good to make space for something true. Endings are a form of leadership. It takes courage to stop what no longer works. It takes maturity to walk away with grace instead of resentment. It takes faith to believe that what's ahead can be better than what's behind. Because peace doesn't come from control. It comes from release. It comes when you no longer need to prove that you can carry everything. It comes when you set something down and finally rest. When I look back now, I don't regret what I ended. I regret how long I waited to do it. I thought leaving would break me, but staying was what kept me broken. The day I finally walked away, there was no celebration, no grand announcement, just quiet. And that quiet felt like truth. It was the first real peace I had felt in years. That's the strange thing about endings. They don't give you fireworks. They give you stillness. And in that stillness, you rediscover the sound of your own life again. There's a moment, right after you let go, when everything feels uncertain. You don't know what's next. You don't have a plan. But there's air in your lungs again. Your chest feels lighter. Your mind stops racing. And for the first time in a long time, you are no longer surviving. You are living. That's what leadership looks like now. Not managing others, but mastering yourself. Knowing when to build and when to stop building. Knowing that sometimes, peace is not found in adding, but in subtracting. When I talk to men now, men in their 50s, 60s, men who have lived enough to know how heavy life can get, they all say the same thing. The hardest part wasn't starting over. It was finally telling the truth about what needed to end. And maybe that's what real courage is. Not fighting harder, but finally being honest, because every man reaches a point where pretending costs more than the truth. You can lie to the world for decades, but you can't lie to your soul. It knows when something is done. It knows when it's time to go. So if you're listening to this and something in you is whispering, it's time. Listen. Don't wait for permission. Don't wait for perfect timing. You don't have to burn it all down. You don't have to explain yourself to anyone. You just have to decide that your peace matters more than your image. Walk away quietly. Close the door softly. And when you do, don't look back. Because the moment you let go, the second half of your life begins. Winners do quit. They quit the wrong things, so they can win at the right ones. They don't chase approval. They follow alignment. They don't cling to what's fading. They make room for what's coming. And that, my friend, is not weakness. That is leadership. That is wisdom. That is freedom. If this message found you at the right time, take a moment, look at your life and ask, what am I still holding that no longer needs me? What deserves a graceful ending? So something better can begin. And if you know your answer, don't run from it. Honor it, because endings, when done right, are not endings at all. They are openings. So if you're ready to stop pretending, ready to stop carrying what's already over, then this is your moment. Take it. And when you do, say it quietly to yourself. I choose peace, because that choice is where everything new begins.